So we have seen yesterday as how do we automate small internet browsers or applications. So even small websites that we have seen. So have anybody tried the same thing? And did you guys face any issues if you have tried it? Okay, so I hope you guys have tried and have not faced any issues. So anyways, let's go ahead and see the basic things that we require or we need to know before we actually get started with our actual programming. So just that we have seen how do we use these recordings as a basic step to understand how things work. So let's go ahead and see what are the different kind of files and how are they created and how do we use them and what are the different types in the first place. So if you see, so basically I hope we have seen the variables yesterday. So different kinds of variables and okay, we haven't seen the scope, right? Or did we see that? So did we cover scope yesterday? I remember it to be yes. So I hope we have covered scope and also the default values. Yeah, we have done. So today we will see, the different type of files that you can create and the difference between each of them and which one to use when. Okay. So there will be basic requirement of small activities. So we will on the flow by the time when and where we need things, we will start using them and then and there I'll explain to you guys what it is and why it is used. Okay, so first of all, what are these files and what is the significance of them? So if you go to your project to the left side corner where my cursor is currently placed, so you go there and see you see there are two files. One is a folder. So the screenshots folder. This is not of interest for us. The only things that are of interest for us are the XAML files. So what are the XAML files? The XAML files are the UiPath executable files. So any file that you create in UiPath, they usually would have an extension as .xml. So these files are called .xaml files or XAML files, which we use, or these are the UiPath executable files. So now you have, so to create a new file, so what do? You go and click on this new, and you see that there will be three options. One is your sequence, one is your flowchart, and one is your state machine. So we'll see what these three are and when each of these should be used. So for example, so all this while whatever we have created were just sequences. So let me say I want to create a sequence. So when I click on this sequence, it will open a new window asking for the name. So let me say sequence demo. So this is the name that I'm giving, and then when I click on enter, it would create that file. So if you see, it has created the XAML file whatever we have given. So I have not given this extension. I have only given the name of the file. So once I've given a name and just said create, it has created a .xml file, and this file will be opened in your studio. So yes, so this is very similar to what we have done. So basically a sequence is a placeholder for different activities that you can use. So let me say I want to use a sign, and then let me say you want to use a click, and then let me say you want to use a message box. So this is where you can create or add all these activities onto your work plan, right? So these are sequences. So this is how you add multiple required values to your sequence and your sequence file. So why are there errors? Because we have not passed any values here, and even here the message box is empty. So that is why it gives an error. So let us delete them. Okay, nice. So now this is all about sequence. So if all the different kind of activities that you want to pull in, or if you want a plain, so consider this as a plain text file. So if you want to add whatever you want into a plain file, then sequence is something that you have to create. Just give me a second. Okay, yeah. So this is all sequences. So let's go back and see what is this flowchart. So usually people would be having an idea of what a flowchart is, right? So a flowchart is a pictorial representation of a small sequence or a rule-based task or a small program or sequence of steps. So let us create this flowchart. So how do you create? You just go and click on new and then select flowchart. So this will give you an option to select the name again. So let me say flowchart underscore demo, right? So I click on enter. So if you see, this is a flowchart example. So this is a bit different to your sequence, correct? So if you go back to your project and see, my flowchart demo also has .xml. There is nothing special. So if you see, my sequence is .xml, my main is .xml, everything else, everything is XML. But the way you see both of these files, right? So when you click on your sequence demo, you see that there is nothing of that sort. Looks like this is an empty empty place and you have nothing here, right? But when you create a flowchart, you will by default have something called a start. So what is the start? So what does this mean and what are the things that you can use? Okay, so any activities you can use under a flowchart, but flowchart has some specific or special dedicated activities such as flow decision, flow switch, and terminate workflow, right? So these are the four specific or three specific activities that you have which are valid or which can be used only under a flowchart. So a flowchart is also a XAML file in the first place. There is no difference in the type of file that it is, but instead of having a complete empty sequence, you will have a small icon called a start. So now you see what does this decision flowchart do or decision flow decision do. So if you see, whenever you place your cursor on this start or decision, you see that there is a way that you can pull and drag and drop something. So have you seen that? So I've just dragged and dropped. Okay, let me delete this again and show. Oh, I'm not getting option to delete it. Okay, looks like my keyboard is a problem. Okay, so basically all you have to do is you'll have to click on this and drag and drop your. Okay, let me use Control Z. Oh yes. So this is how it will be, and now you will have to connect this start. So basically, whenever you start executing on this flowchart, the first activity that is going to execute is from your start. So from this, whichever activity or whichever flow specific activity that you connect, that will be executed in the first place. So let me use this decision. So how do I connect these two? I just have to draw a line. So when I place my cursor on this, you see that there on the four edges, I see there are four kind of small pop-ups that are coming up. So I hold my mouse there, drag and drop. So this has created a connection between your start and your decision. So what else can you do instead of this? So you can just connect this directly to your switch. So now in this case, when you run your flowchart, the first thing that will be executed is from your start, it directly goes to your switch. So we will see the switch and decision in some time. So for time being, let me delete this and let me show you how does this connection make a difference. So let us use our basic message boxes, right? So I have a message box. So let me say this is first message box, and let me have one more of that sort, and let me say this is my second message box, right? So that is my first and this is my second. So I have two message boxes here. So these two are message boxes which are just going to give me a display, right? So now if I connect my start to my message box, and connect this here. Yes. So how do I know that is my message box 1? So for that, let me just edit the name of these message boxes. So this is my first message box and this is my second. So now when I run this flow, if you can see my start, my control goes to start. Since my first message box is connected directly to your start, this will be executed first. Post this, you have a connection to your second message box. So this will be executed next. So let us run. Okay, so the first one is your message box, and next is your second message box, right? So this has been executed in the order whatever we have given to it. So now let me just change the control a bit. So let me bring this and connect to my second message box. From the second message box, I'm going to my first message box, right? Oh, why isn't this changed? Okay, the name is changed. Okay, let me type this as second message box, first message box. Okay, so now you have your second message box which is directly connected to your start. That means when your flow has started or your execution is starting, it will first go to your second message box and then go to your first. So this, if you see in your sequence, you do not have these arrow marks which will be connected and which will be very easy to analyze or understand just as how you have in a flowchart. Instead, you will have to change the order of this same execution. So let me say I use the same activities here. So I have my second message box. So the same message box is whatever I have here that I put here. So here it is not sure or it is not as intuitive as it is there in your flowcharts, because in flowchart you can directly see that your line is connected from start to the second message box and from there it is going to first. Also, let us run this in the first place. So let me save and run. So the first executed message box is your second message box, and then you're going to first. So why is that? Because I've connected that in this order. So now in the similar way, if you want to change this order, so currently I have in the first place, I have my first message box. Next I have my second. So when I run this, this will be executed in the same order. Whichever is in the first place, that will be executed first. Okay, so let us give an okay. Second, right. So now if you want to change the order here, all you have to do is just replace the second one with the first. So this is just change of order that is going to change or reflect the way the code is being executed. So now let me run this. So all that I've done is I've dragged and dropped my second message box in before my first message box. So now let us run. So you see the first thing that is being executed is your second and then first. If you do the same thing here, so let me say now I currently have my first message box and then second. So if I change this to anything else, this will not affect my flow, because the flow is not decided or defined by the order of these activities. Instead, it is defined by the connections that we give. Correct? So if you see the first, you have your second message box and then your first, so it is connected like that. So now let me change the order. Okay. So if I change the order and put this in above this, but still it does not make any difference, right? It is the same. So when I run, if you see, all that I've done is I've just changed the order, but still it does not affect anything. It is only the second message box that is coming first. Even though my first message box is in the upper side, like here, if I have my first message box in the upper side, then this one will be executed first. So things to note here or to understand here is, in a sequence, the order of the activities you place is the order that they are going to be executed. So very straightforward. If you keep two message boxes first and then a small assign or something else in the next stage, so they will be implemented or executed in the order that you place them. But instead, in a flowchart, it is not relevant, or it does not make any sense to follow the order, because they are completely connected by these connections that you manually or explicitly have to give. So now let us go and see. So now that we have seen basic things of the basic difference of execution between this and that, so now let us go and see what exactly is the purpose of this flowchart. and how is this more intuitive compared to your regular sequence, correct? So now, so let us go to my sequence demo. So this is my sequence. So this is not a flowchart. This is just a sequence. Correct. So now here, consider I just want to have a small if condition. Okay. So before I have an if condition, let me use an assign and also create a variable. So we have seen how do we create variables. How do we do that? We give the name, say decide or factor underscore boolean, and now I have to convert this to boolean, and the scope is my sequence demo, right? So now in my boolean, uh, invalid operation exception is already disconnected first. Okay. Okay. So we have these small glitches that your path will throw at times, which does not make any sense. Okay. So now my variable name is factor boolean, and let me say I have false for it. I have set my variable as false. So now, if this boolean is false, I want to display my second message box. If this boolean is true, then I have to display my first message box. Let us consider that. Or let me say, this is my true message box, and this is my false message box. So depending on this boolean value, I have to print either true or false, but not both. So now if I run this, by default, first will be assigned, and my first message box will be executed, second message box will be executed. So there is no condition that is separating these two things, right? So how do you bring that condition here? So your conditional loop start here. So all you do is you just have to use an if statement. Just as how you use for if, then and else in your other languages, this is also very similar. All you have to do is just drag and drop your if. This will give you a visual graphical user interface instead of you manually typing if space this condition, and then if it is true, then do this, else do that. So instead of doing all that, so you can do it using this UI advantages part. Oh, one second. So now here all you have to do is just check the condition. So let me say if whatever condition that I give here gives me a true, then I will go to then. If it is false, then I'll go to else. So this is very similar to all the other coding languages. So let me say if anything is true, then I want to display my true message box. So I put my true message box inside your then. So this then is a true sequence. So if I want to use my second message box into else, I just drag and drop it there. So I have assigned my boolean to a variable, and then I have used an if condition. So this is a true statement, and sorry, this is a true sequence. This is the false because this is under then and this is under else. So now here all I have to do is, because this is by default a boolean, I need not give a condition. So basically a condition will return true or false depending on which your flow is designed. So just because you already have that, so let me say factor boolean, right? So let me save this, and now when I run, you see, just because I have given false, this sequence should be executed. So I should get my false message box, right? This is the false area, so I should get my false message box. Okay, I have a question here. Why we should have to give factor? So I've just given the name as factor, so there is no point in having only the name as factor. So is that your question? Why are we using the name factor? No, so that is just a deciding factor. So I've just put it as factor. That's it. So there is nothing special or anything about that. You can just give any name. All you can do is you can just go and change my variable name to, sorry, bool underscore variable. So this is just a name. So I've just set that to bool variable now. So everything that I have been replaced. So now let us save. And now when I run this, because this is false, my false message box should be visible or should be displayed. Okay, so that is displayed and it is done. So now let us change this to true. In that case, your true message box should be visible. So save and run. All right. So you have your true message box coming up. So this is how you use your if conditions in your sequence, correct? So all you have to do is drag and drop this if and use. So the advantage with your flowchart is you can have, instead of having this if, you can say there is a flow decision. So just give that here. So if you see, your true flow will go this way, false flow will go this way. So now let me copy this, which is my true message box. And now if it is true, then the true sequence will go and connect to this message box, right? And next, if it is false, then I'm having a message box here which will tell me this is false. So I connect my false join to that. So now if you see how intuitive or how visually pleasing is this. So it is very clear. So when even a small child who is going to see this flow will very easily understand that there is a start. So there's a decision box. So something will happen. It will either give true or false. If it is true, it will go here. If it is false, it will go here. So how do you design something or put something into this decision? So when you click on this, you see there is something called a decision here. Correct? So in my properties, so just as how we have seen in the previous classes, this properties pane is the one that will be using very clearly or very frequently. So this condition is what I have to tell. So let me just give a true here without creating a variable. So now if I give a true here, what will happen? My code will directly go from start to my true message box, correct? So let me save and run. So I have my true message box. So if I change the condition value to false, so I will then have my second message box, right? So now also do not get confused that only if you have true you will go here, only if you have false you'll go here. These are just names, whatever they have named. So you can change the names here. So if you see your true label says, if I change this to go here, and then for this I change this to go there. So if you see, it is the names have been changed to go here and go there. So these two are only the visual cues that will help us or help the user or the client or the person who is going to reuse this bot or a code for easy understanding. But instead, these values do not make any sense to your actual condition. So here many people have in my earlier classes they have asked if I change the name here from true to go here, then do I have to give go here? So that was one of the silly questions that I've received. So just to be clear, so this only accepts a condition which might return true or false, right? So okay, let us see if not just true or false. Let's not just type true or false. Let us give a real condition now. So what do we give? Okay, let us create a variable. This time let's create an integer. So let's say variable underscore integer. Say int 32, and that's scope. And my default value was 0. So my default value, whatever I'm mentioning to my variable which is of type integer, is 0. So now let me go back here and I want to check if my integer is 0 or not. Only if it is 0, then I have to go to my true case. If it is any number other than 0, then I have to go to my false. So in that case, all I have to check is my number equals 0. Correct? So now how do I check? So I just give my variable here I equals 0. Oh, there's only one single equals. Right. Oh, I is not accessible. Oh shit. We have created the variable name as parent not I. So that is the problem. So let me change this to parent equals 0. So now here if you see, this is not a true or false. Instead this is a condition check. So here I am telling my variable integer is equal to 0. It could be true or it could be false. So currently I have set that value to 0 here. If you see, my default value is 0. So when I run this, it should go into true sequence. So let us run this. True. And if I change this value to say, let's variable and is equal to 2, and save this, and now run. You should, as expected, you should receive your false message. Correct? So this is the advantage that you have with your flowcharts. So it is, so the visual advantage is of huge scale when compared to your sequence. So just because this is a small piece of code that we are writing just with true or false and only one of those, it is very easy to understand. And you might think it is even easy to look at here and also understand. Just consider if you have nested loops or nested ifs. So if you say, let me say I have this, okay, let me pull this out. So let us just see a two-level nested if condition. So I hope people are aware of what nested ifs are, right? So if they are not aware, nested ifs are one if condition inside another if. So basically you have this if condition. So if depending on the value here, true or false, you will go into either true sequence or false sequence. So once you go into true or false, and again you have an if sequence there. So in that case, it is called a nested if because one if is within inside another if. So all such things which are inside itself are called nests. Okay. So now let us use this if and check for something else. Okay. So let me say my change my bool variable to some reasonable name. So let me say person underscore present. So just consider this as a boolean which will have a value of telling true or false, telling if the person is present or not. If he is present, so now let me say the person underscore gender. So this could be a string. So it will be male or female or any of those two. So now if you see, the first thing that I want to check is if my person is present or not. If he is present, then I should go back and check if he is a male or female. So let me say my person gender equals double quotes male. In that case, I'll tell male person is waiting. Okay. If it is not a male, then I'll tell female person is waiting. And in the other case, no one is waiting. Right? So now if you see, so this might look a little complicated already because you have an if, inside if there is another if. So inside this again if there are again two cases, if and else, true and false. And for your earlier sequence you have this, no one is waiting. So now let me say I have a male person and he's waiting. So let me say gender and it is male, right? So now, so when we run this, what will happen? So my person present is true, so it will come into this true sequence, which is then, and then it will go and check for male. So if it is male, yes, it will tell male person is waiting. So this looks easy, right? It is not really confusing. So let us run this. So if you see, you directly got this male person is waiting. So now let me just change this value to anything else. So let me give a female. Now save and run. So you will directly get this. So I hope people are clear with the flow. So now try to implement the same thing in a flow chart. So you have a decision box here, which will tell. So let's replace this name with person present, yes, present, and then this is no, none present, right? So instead of just having the message box, let us delete this message box. So now what are you supposed to do? So you have, if so you have a condition here. So let us also create the variable here and say person underscore gender string, and by default let me give male, right? So this is going to be the name of the string value, and the variable also need not be integer here. Let us give same name, person underscore available, which is a boolean, and the default value is false. Oh, let me keep this true or else we'll not get into this loop. So right, I've changed the default value to true. So now what am I supposed to do? So I have this condition where my person available is a boolean, right? So if it is true, then I have to do another check, correct? So for another check, what am I supposed to do in a flowchart? Again, I have to use my decision. So which is really easy. So now I just bring this and connect here. So now if it is present, then you're having another check. So what is this? If person gender equals male, right? So if it is male, then you have your message boxes from here. I'm just copy pasting it from here so that I don't have to drag and drop and do all that. So this is my true sequence, uh, and then I have my false sequence. So now if you see with respect to your previous code, just compare this and see. So this looks a little clumsy and little not really visually pleasing or convincing, correct? But when you do the same thing in a flowchart, it is really easy. So or it is easy to understand. So we do not use flowcharts for every if-else condition because we might have thousands of if-elses and we cannot keep creating these flowcharts. So basically we use these flowcharts only while doing your major decisions. So for example, in the case, just consider you have your insurance case. Okay, just as how we have seen on the first days of our demo class. So we have told we will take the insurance claim, or so, let's say somebody has met with an accident or with a car accident and they want to claim for the repair charges. So when they do that, so the first thing that we will always check is if the car is, the car policy is not outdated or it is renewed properly. Only if that is renewed or if the policy is not expired, then you will do everything else, or else you directly tell this claim is invalid, correct? So that is a very major decision. So after going into the actual processor, you might have like 20 or 30 different checks which might tell if this is true, then this, if this is not true, then something else. So in every if else we will not be using these flowcharts, but these flowcharts, so just consider if you have a big project and you have to take a major deviation from the path for a specific decision or on it based on a specific value. So all such things you will put in this flowcharts, right? So going forward also we will see how do we incorporate these flowcharts into other files. So currently you see all these are independent files. These are nowhere linked. So you can also do this linking between different two files and make sure that one XAML file is executed after the other one. So and so forth in that order or manner, right? So this is about flowcharts. So similar, so we also have a switch case with respect to your flowcharts. So we will also say this. Okay, so let me say once you have this thing true and they are male. Okay, before I go that, let me show you in sequence. So in this sequence, so once you have this person as male, then you have to, so just consider you have to do a switch case. So what is a switch case? So I hope people are aware of what are aware of what a switch case is, right? Uh, oh shit! This is a switch which will be available only in a flowchart and nowhere else. I'm really sorry that I'm doing that. Trying to do it there, right? So now, what is the switch case? So let me use this later. This is not allowing me to do that. Let me remove this. So now, if it's a male, and then you want to just consider you have split the age in terms of in between. If it is in between 0 and 12, then you're going to tell they are in their toddler stage, and 12 to 16 adolescence, and then 16 to or 20 is your teen, and plus 20 is adult, and above 40 is like old age. So just consider you have all these small rules, or the age group that you're trying to classify, correct? So now, if you are trying to do that using if conditions, so how many if conditions do you have to use? So you will have to check if the age is in between 15 and 20. If not that, then go back and see if it is in between 40 and 50 and all those details, right? So instead of that, you can just use a switch case. So if it, so we cannot use a range if we are using a switch. Instead, you will only have to use specific these things. So let me say, so for example, what else can we do in the case of switch? Okay, we can also use their month, date month, birth month, and you can tell they're born in this March, Feb, April, and all that, right? So let us see how your switch case makes it really easy compared to an if. So let me say I don't want this also. Delete. So if it is a male, if it is a true, then you come here. So let me create a variable here and say uh, month underscore date of birth, which is of type integer. Probably I'll just need the month, so it is in between 1 and 12. So now what is my switch case? So if in whichever month they are born, if they give the number as 3, then I have to tell he is born in March. If it's given as 12, then I have to tell that he is born in December. So simple, right? So let me give the expression as age. Oh, sorry, month underscore date of birth. So this is my expression. So depending on the value coming inside this, the switch will be allocating for different values. So let me take one here. So let me connect this, and if you see, the moment I click here, my case is going to ask me if it's a default case. Then I'll say no. If only if the case is 1, then go there. So now inside the message box, what do I tell? This is January born person, right? If they give 2, then I'm supposed to tell that it is a Feb born person. So February. So similarly, you can do this for all different 12 classes. So all you have to do is I'll just have to connect all of these using my switch. From the switch, and and then set the value. So how do I set the value? This value is going to be 2. Correct? So now this is how you can make it really visually very interesting and clear in terms of execution, implementing your flow. If you try to do the same thing in a sequence, so if you are trying to use a switch case, do not worry if you're not really familiar with the switch case and all. We will have a separate session to handle all the conditional statements and loops available in this UiPath. So now we have here switch. So similar to how we have done there, we'll have to create a variable and give the expression here, and then keep adding new case. If it is 1, then give a message box. Here I'll have a message box telling that is born in Jan. If I have case 2, then I'll tell is born in Feb. All these details in this, within this each and every case. So if you are writing things like this in your sequence, it is easily understandable, that is agreed, but it is not as easy as compared to your flowcharts, right? So that is why these flowcharts are used at a higher level understanding of the process. It is, but it is not used in the lower level. So it is not recommended to use these flowcharts inside or while your execution, but instead have this at a higher level or before your execution starts, and to just control the flow where it has to go. So you might not really clearly understand what exactly I mean by not in the lower level and use it only in the higher level. So we will see, we will take up small projects during this course, and then you will see how this flowcharts will help us at a higher level, and then it is not really recommended at the low levels. Yes. So any questions? So we also have, along with this flowchart sequence, something called state machine. That is a little more complicated than these flowcharts and state machines. They are that is what we actually use in the first part of our project. So state machine probably we'll see tomorrow. We do not have enough time to see it today. Okay, this is a question. So we can create as many flowcharts. Yes, you can create as many flowcharts as you want. So there is no, so it would only create more and more files in your project, and there is no harm in doing that. Any more questions? Okay, if there are no questions, then let's go ahead and complete this thing and just see how good it looks on a flowchart than what is compared to your sequence. So now uh, um, okay, is there a question? I see a hand raised from Archana. Is there any question or any trouble that you're facing? So let me change this from 0 to the case 3. So if there are any questions to anybody, please you can unmute and just bring up the questions.
Yes. Is there anything that we should follow the rule like first sequence or first flowchart? Is there anything like that, or we can do whatever we want?
Sorry, I didn't get your question. Can you please repeat?
Is there anything that we should follow a rule that first we have to go for a sequence or next a flowchart or anything else like that, or
No, no,
we
it
do
is not strictly decided by rules. So basically, it is only decided by your own comfort. So when you see, so just imagine you have like 4 or 5 different sequences to go, depend so on some basic factors. Okay, So not every process will go through the same procedure, correct? So just consider if you have an mail that is coming in and you do not have an attachment, then you will not use the download attachment option that is available in your code, correct? And also, just to give you another example, if you're trying to open a website and try to see if there is a download that is available there, or it is already ready or it is not ready. If it is not there, then you're not going to use that sequence of downloading the file from your browser. So to skip this, if you are putting that in a sequence, because that is in a very high level, once you open your browser, you will immediately know if you have to download that or not. So what you do is you propagate this information back to your main sequence, or no, the central sequence, or central state machine, or maybe flowchart, whatever it is. There you will make this decision of telling if you have to use or or do not use that piece of code, right?
Then why did you choose?
So just to straightforwardly answer your question, there is no fixed rule that you are supposed to use, but it is always recommended to use state machine as a first executional part in a project, because that gives you more intuitive understanding of what exactly is happening in the project. So this flowchart gives you at least 60% of visual understanding or better understanding. But when you go back to your state machines, they are even better. They have even more lot functionalities, and that gives you good control over your project on a higher hierarchical level.
Okay, so I got the doubt when you are
So
changing
did I answer
the
your question?
yes. Basically, I got the doubt when you change the sequence second and that is the first message and second message thing.
Sorry, your voice is missed out, or it is not really clear.
Basically, I got this doubt when you change the flowchart first and the sequence second.
Acha, so when I changed it to sequence and trying to implement the same thing.
Yes.
No, no, no. I was just trying to show you how different, or visually what is the difference that you will have when you are using a flowchart and a sequence. You can use any of both. The functionality is same, but it is only for the better understanding of us. So tomorrow, when you build a really big project and use only sequences, and post like 4 or 5 months down the lane, you have to do some changes and come back to the project. It will be really tough to understand the complete sequence. Instead, once you go through a flowchart, it will give you a really good understanding. So that is the reason we also have these flowcharts in real time rather than just Word and Notepad files. So this
Okay.
pictorial representation will give you a better understanding always.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So yes, I had to cover one more part. So which are called arguments. So yesterday we have only seen our variables and scope and your default value. So these arguments are something which are very common, very similar to your variables. So that is here next to your variables pane. So now I have clicked on variables, and then you have these arguments. So these arguments are the variables that will help to communicate between two different XAMLs. So for example, I have my main here and I have my flowchart demo here. So for example, I want to send some information from my flowchart demo to my main. I will use this arguments. So it is possible to pass information between XAMLs using only arguments. So variables will not be helpful to pass information between the XAML files. It is only variables that do that. So when you create an sorry, it is only the arguments that you will be able to do that. So when you create an argument, you also have to specify what is the direction. So is it coming? So is this argument, is it carrying information into your XAML? So this argument will have an information that is coming into your flowchart demo, or your argument will contain a value that is going outside the flowchart demo. So that is decided by this direction. So you have your in, you have your out, and in out, and property is very same as your in out. So when you say in out, it will carry information while coming in, and if you do any modifications, they will be reflected back in your XAML that is connected to this XAML. So we will see how do we connect two different XAMLs and pass information. So there is something called invoking XAML files. So we will see that. So that is when these arguments come into place. So these arguments also have your data type that you have to specify. Similar to your data, variables are specified that this variable is going to contain strings or is going to carry your booleans or integers. Even these arguments have this type. You have to maintain or specify, specifically tell what is the type of the argument that it, or type of the data that it is going to carry. So is it clear? And in this case, we do not have scope because these are valid across your XAML and also in the other XAML that is being called or that you are trying to invoke this. So if you're not understanding about these arguments, don't worry, just think them as variables. They are very same as variables. So even now in my sequence, so if I can simply use an assign and use this argument as a basic variable how I use. So let me show you. So I have created that as string. So I select the argument that I have, and then let me say this is Sangeet. So this will not be a problem. I can use this as variable. But the only difference is these variables are valid only within this sequence. Or the scope of this variable is only as to what you can define, and the uppermost that you can define is the name of this sequence or the XAML file that you have. But for arguments, you do not have that scope at all. So this is valid even in main if you are trying to connect this main and flowchart demo together, right? So are you at least on an overview you understand what arguments are and why are they used? Okay, hope people are clear with this thing. So we'll see this arguments part also when we come to that specific piece of explanation where we show how do we integrate two different XAML files and make them work together. So at that time we will also see practical implementations of sending data and displaying them in the other XAML files rather than just no in one file. So any doubts so far? So probably we are towards the end of today's class. So if there are any questions, you're open to bring them up. Okay, so if we do not have any questions, then let's close the session. So tomorrow we'll see the state machine and also how it is used and what is the importance of it. Why does it always be the first part of your execution? So there is a very good importance that state machine carries. So tomorrow we'll see that, and also we'll begin with our selectors, which is the core or the let us say the sole strength of your UiPath and how complicated it can get to, right? Okay, so hope people have no questions. So let's make a call to close the session and meet up tomorrow. Okay, thank you everyone, thanks for joining, see you all tomorrow, bye bye.